As I was about to step into the exclusive dinner my daughter-in-law had invited me to, my lawyer called. "Leave. Immediately. Come to my office. You won't believe what I've uncovered." When I arrived, my entire world collapsed. But let me start from the beginning. Because the betrayal I discovered that night had roots that went back months, maybe even years. I'm Betty, 70 years old, and until a year ago I thought I had a family who loved me. My husband Harold passed away after 45 years of marriage, leaving me in a house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. The grief was overwhelming. But I kept telling myself I had Michael and Patricia, my son and daughter-in-law, and their two beautiful children, Emma and Joshua. They would help me through this difficult time. How wrong I was. The dinner invitation came on a Tuesday afternoon. Patricia called, which was unusual since she rarely contacted me directly anymore. Her voice was unusually sweet, almost syrupy as she spoke. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. Betty, I've been thinking about you so much lately. I know this past year has been incredibly difficult and I want to do something special for you. I felt a flutter of hope in my chest. Since Harold's death, I'd felt increasingly isolated. The weekly family dinners had stopped. The grandchildren's visits became rare, always cut short by Patricia claiming they had activities or homework. Even Michael seemed distant, always busy with work or projects around their house. "What did you have in mind, dear?" I asked, trying not to sound too eager. "I've made reservations at the Sterling Club downtown. You know, that beautiful place with the crystal chandeliers. I thought we could have a lovely dinner, just the family. Maybe invite a few of our friends too. Make it really special." The Sterling Club. I'd only been there once for Michael and Patricia's wedding reception 8 years ago. It was the kind of place that required reservations weeks in advance, and cost more for one meal than I spent on groceries in a month. "Patricia, that's so thoughtful, but it sounds expensive." "Don't you worry about that," she interrupted quickly. "This is our treat. You deserve to be celebrated, Betty. You've been through so much and we want to show you how much you mean to us." Words were exactly what I needed to hear, but something in her tone felt rehearsed, like she was reading from a script. Still, I pushed that uncomfortable feeling aside. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe grief was making me suspicious of kindness. "When were you thinking?" "Yes. How about Saturday evening? 7 o'clock. I'll pick you up at 6:30, so you don't have to worry about driving downtown." Saturday was 3 days away. I spent those 3 days in a state I hadn't experienced since Harold's funeral. Genuine excitement mixed with nervous anticipation. I went to the beauty salon for the first time in months, having my gray hair styled and colored to hide the roots I'd been ignoring. I bought a new dress from the department store, navy blue with a subtle pattern, something appropriate for a fancy restaurant. I called my sister Ruth in Phoenix to tell her about the dinner. "That's wonderful, Betty," she but I detected something cautious in her voice. "It's about time they made an effort." "What do you mean?" Ruth was quiet for a moment. "Well, you know, I've been worried about how little you hear from them. When was the last time you saw the grandchildren?" I had to think about it, which was depressing in itself. Emma's birthday party in March. But that was just for an hour or so. Patricia said they had other plans. "Betty, that was 4 months ago." The reality of that hit me hard, but I pushed it away. This dinner was proof that things were changing, that Patricia had noticed my loneliness and wanted to fix it. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, typical for late October in our City. I dressed carefully, putting on the new dress and the pearl necklace Harold had given me for our 40th anniversary. I even applied makeup, something I'd barely bothered with since becoming a widow. At exactly 6:30 I heard a car in my driveway. Through the window, I saw Patricia getting out of her silver Mercedes holding an umbrella. She was dressed elegantly as always in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. Grabbed my purse and coat, took one last look in the hallway mirror, and opened the door. "Betty, you look absolutely lovely," Patricia said, though her smile seemed tight around the edges. "That dress is perfect. Thank you, dear. I'm so excited about tonight. It's been too long since we've all spent time together." As we drove downtown, Patricia kept up a steady stream of chatter about the restaurant, the menu, how elegant everything would be. But I noticed she avoided mentioning who else would be joining us, despite saying she'd invited friends. The Sterling Club was even more impressive than I remembered. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables, set with crisp white linens and gleaming silverware. A piano player in the corner added to the sophisticated atmosphere. Patricia guided me toward the back of the restaurant where I could see a large, round table set for about 8 people. Michael was already there looking handsome in a dark suit talking to a man I didn't recognize, middle-aged, professional-looking with a briefcase beside his chair. Michael stood and kissed my cheek, but it felt perfunctory, like checking an item off a list. "You look nice." "Thank you, sweetheart. So good to see you." Patricia introduced the stranger as Dr. Richard Holbrook, a friend from the medical community. There was also another couple I'd never met, the Hendersons, who Patricia described as longtime family friends, though I'd never heard their names before. We sat down and I found myself placed at the head of the table, which felt honoring, until I realized it also positioned me directly across from Dr. Holbrook, who kept watching me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. The conversation flowed around me, but I felt oddly disconnected from it. The Hendersons asked questions about my health, my living situation, how I was managing since Harold's death. Dr. Holbrook nodded thoughtfully at my answers, occasionally making notes on a small pad. "Betty," Dr. Holbrook said during the appetizer course, "Patricia and Michael have mentioned that you've been struggling since your husband's passing. That's completely normal, of course. Grief affects everyone differently." I glanced at Patricia, confused. "Struggling? I wouldn't say I'm struggling exactly." "Mom," Michael interrupted gently, "you have to admit, you've had some difficult moments. The confusion about dates, forgetting appointments." My heart skipped a beat. What confusion? What appointments? I kept a careful calendar. Always had. Since Harold's death, if anything, I'd become more organized, not less. "Don't know what you mean," I said quietly. Patricia reached over and patted my hand. "It's okay, Betty. We're all here 'cause we care about you." That's when my phone rang. The ringtone cut through the elegant atmosphere like an alarm. Fumbled in my purse, embarrassed, planning to quickly silence it. But when I saw the name on the screen, Daniel Morrison, attorney at law, my blood ran cold. Daniel had been our neighbor for 23 years. After Harold's death, he'd helped me with some legal paperwork and had become something of a confidant. He never called in the evenings unless something was seriously wrong. "I'm so sorry," I murmured to the table. "This is my lawyer. He wouldn't call unless it was urgent," I answered quickly. "Daniel." His voice was sharp, urgent, completely unlike his usual calm demeanor. "Betty, where are you right now?" I'm at the Sterling Club downtown, having dinner with Michael and Patricia. Listen to me very carefully, he interrupted, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. Make an excuse and leave immediately. Come to my office. You won't believe what I've uncovered. The words hit me like ice water. Around the table, I could see Patricia's face had gone pale, and Michael was leaning forward, trying to hear the conversation. Daniel, I don't understand. Trust me, Betty. Leave now. Whatever they've told you, whatever this dinner is supposed to be, it's not what you think. I'll explain everything when you get here, but you need to leave that restaurant immediately. My hands were shaking as I ended the 8 faces around the table were staring at me, and for the first time I saw them clearly. Not family and friends celebrating me, but conspirators whose plan had just been interrupted. Have to go, I said, standing unsteadily. There's been an emergency, Betty. Surely. Whatever it is can wait, Dr. Holbrook said, half rising from his chair. We haven't even had our main course yet. But I was already moving, grabbing my coat and purse. Patricia caught my arm as I passed her chair. Betty, please. Don't leave. We've planned this whole evening for you. Something in her grip, too tight, too desperate, confirmed what Daniel's call had suggested. This wasn't a celebration. This was something else entirely. I have to go, I repeated, pulling free from her grasp. As I walked quickly toward the exit, I heard Michael's voice behind me. Mom, you're being irrational. Come back and sit down. But I kept walking, my heart pounding, Daniel's urgent words echoing in my head. When I reached the street, I called a taxi and gave the driver Daniel's office address. As we pulled away from the Sterling Club, I looked back through the rear window. Through the restaurant's large windows, I could see the table where I'd been sitting. Patricia was on her phone, gesturing frantically. Michael was talking rapidly to Dr. Holbrook, who was shaking his head. Whatever I just escaped from, I knew my life had just changed forever. Daniel's office building was dark except for a few scattered windows, but I could see light spilling from his third-floor corner office. The taxi driver gave me a concerned look as I paid him. You sure you want to be dropped off here this late, ma'am? Looks pretty empty. Yes, thank you. Someone's waiting for me. As I stood on the sidewalk watching the taxi pull away, I felt a wave of uncertainty. What was I doing here? Maybe Michael was right. Maybe I was being irrational, letting paranoia ruin a perfectly nice evening that my family had planned for me. The lobby security guard recognized me from previous visits and let me up without question. Daniel's door was already open when I reached the 3rd floor, and I could hear him on the phone, his voice tense and urgent. No, she left the restaurant. Thank God. She's on her way here now. Yes, I'm sure. I have all the documentation right here. He looked up as I appeared in the doorway, and I was struck by how haggard he looked. Daniel was normally impeccably groomed, but tonight his tie was loose, his usually perfect gray hair disheveled. Betty, thank goodness, he said, ending his call and hurrying over to me. Sit down, please. Can I get you some water? Coffee? Daniel, what's going on? Scared me half to death with that phone call. He guided me to the leather chair across from his desk, then moved around to face me, his expression grave. Betty, I need you to prepare yourself. What I'm about to tell you is going to be very difficult to hear. My hands began to tremble again. You're scaring me. Daniel opened a thick manila folder on his. This afternoon I received a call from Dr. Sarah Chen. Do you know who that is? I shook my head. Is a geriatric psychiatrist who specializes in competency evaluations. Who called me because your name had come up in a very unusual request, and something about it bothered her enough to reach out. Daniel pulled out a document and handed it to me. Patricia contacted Dr. Chen 2 weeks ago requesting an emergency competency evaluation for you. She claimed that you'd been exhibiting signs of severe cognitive decline and that the family was concerned for your safety. The words on the paper swam before my eyes. I could see my name, my address, but the medical terminology was confusing and frightening. I don't understand what's a competency evaluation. Daniel's jaw tightened. It's a legal process used to determine whether someone is mentally capable of making their own decisions. If you're declared incompetent, a guardian can be appointed to make decisions about your finances, your living situation, your medical care, essentially your entire life. The room seemed to tilt, but I'm perfectly fine. I've never had any problems with my memory or decision-making. I know that. And so does Dr. I. Chen, which is why she called me. She said Patricia was very insistent, claiming that you'd been having episodes of confusion, forgetting important appointments, showing signs of paranoia and erratic behavior. That's not true. My voice came out as a whisper. None of that is true. Daniel pulled out another document. According to Patricia's statement, you've been calling her at all hours, confused about where you are. She claimed you forgot your doctor's appointment last month and showed up at the wrong medical building, insisting they had changed your appointment without telling you. I stared at him. I haven't called Patricia at odd hours, and I didn't have a doctor's appointment last month. I haven't seen Dr. Williams since my physical in May. Dr. Chen became suspicious when Patricia insisted on a rushed evaluation. She said most family members are reluctant to pursue competency proceedings because they're so invasive and traumatic. But Patricia seemed eager, almost impatient to get the process started. Daniel handed me another paper. This is what really caught Dr. Chen's attention. Patricia requested that the evaluation be conducted in a public setting with multiple witnesses present rather than in a clinical environment. She specifically suggested tonight's dinner at the Sterling Club. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The dinner wasn't a celebration. It was supposed to be my competency hearing. Exactly. Dr. Holbrook isn't just any doctor. He's a psychiatrist who works with Dr. Chen on these evaluations. The other couple, the Hendersons, they're professional witnesses who testify in competency cases. Felt sick. You mean they were all there to watch me, to look for signs that I'm losing my mind? Patricia's plan was to create a situation where you would appear confused, disoriented, or emotionally unstable in front of professional witnesses. Then they could have you declared incompetent and petition the court for guardianship. But why? The question came out as a SOA. Why would they want to do this to me? Daniel hesitated, then pulled out another folder. Betty, I need to ask you some questions about your finances. Do you know how much money you have in your various accounts? Course. Harold and I were always very careful about money. Between our savings, his life insurance, and my pension, I have about $450,000. Plus the house is paid off. It's probably worth another $300,000. Daniel nodded grimly. That's what I thought. Betty, if Michael and Patricia were appointed as your guardians, they would have complete control over all of that money. They could sell your house, move you into a care facility, and manage your assets as they saw fit. The full scope of the betrayal was becoming clear. My own family had planned to steal not just my money, but my freedom. My independence, my very identity. There's more, Daniel said gently. Chen did some checking after Patricia's call. It turns out this isn't the first time Patricia has been involved in a competency case. 3 years ago, she worked as a private aide for an elderly woman named Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell. Mrs. Hartwell's family later accused Patricia of manipulating their mother and influencing her to change her will. What happened? Nothing came of it legally. Mrs. Hartwell died before the case could be fully investigated, but the family was convinced that Patricia had isolated their mother from them and convinced her to leave a substantial portion of her estate to Patricia personally. He sat in stunned silence, processing this information. The Patricia I thought I knew, Michael's wife, the mother of my grandchildren, was apparently someone else entirely, a predator who targeted vulnerable elderly people. Daniel, how did you find all this out? Dr. Chen wasn't comfortable with Patricia's request from the beginning when she started asking around about Patricia's background. She discovered the connection to Mrs. Hartwell. Also, found it suspicious that Patricia seemed to know so much about the competency process. Most people have never heard of emergency evaluations or professional witnesses. Daniel leaned forward in his chair. Betty, I think Patricia has been planning this for months, maybe since shortly after Harold died. She's been carefully building a case that you're mentally declining, preparing for this moment. I thought about the past year, all the little things that had seemed odd or hurtful. Patricia's growing distance, her reluctance to include me in family activities. The way she would sometimes ask me the same question multiple times, as if testing my memory. She's been setting me up, I said quietly, making me look unreliable or confused. Think so. And tonight was supposed to be the final step, getting you declared incompetent in front of witnesses, then moving quickly to have guardianship transferred to Michael and Patricia. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Patricia. Betty, we're all very worried about you. Please call me so we know you're safe. The way you left dinner was very concerning. Showed the message to Daniel, who frowned. She's already starting to build the narrative that your behavior tonight was erratic and concerning. What do I do now? I felt utterly lost, betrayed by the people I loved most in the world. First, you need to understand that you're not alone in this. I've been your neighbor for over 20 years, Betty. Watched you care for Harold through his illness with complete dedication and competence. I've seen you manage your household, your finances, your health. There's nothing wrong with your judgment or your mental capacity. But how do we prove that? Daniel smiled for the first time all evening. We already have. Chen's willingness to alert me about Patricia's plan is essentially professional testimony that she doesn't believe you need a competency evaluation. And I have an idea for how we can turn this whole situation to our advantage. What do you mean, Betty? Patricia has shown her true intentions. Revealed herself as someone who would manipulate and exploit you for financial gain. But she doesn't know that we know about her plan. That gives us a tremendous advantage. Daniel pulled out a legal pad and began writing. Here's what we're going to do tomorrow. You're going to call Patricia and apologize for leaving dinner so abruptly. You're going to say that you were confused and upset and you're embarrassed about your behavior. But I wasn't confused. I know that. But Patricia will interpret your apology as confirmation that you're having mental difficulties. It will make her confident that her plan is working and that she can proceed with the guardianship petition. You want me to pretend that I'm losing my mind? Daniel nodded. Not losing your mind exactly, but appearing vulnerable and susceptible to her influence. Meanwhile, we'll be documenting everything she does, gathering evidence of her true intentions. When the time comes, we'll be ready to expose her. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't experienced in months. A sense of purpose, of fighting. You think this could work? I think Patricia has underestimated both of us. She sees you as an easy target and me as just a family friend. She has no idea that we're on to her game. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Patricia. Betty, Michael is very upset about tonight. Please let us help you. Looked at Daniel. Should I respond? Not tonight. Let her worry. Tomorrow we start our counterattack. Daniel walked me to the elevator. I felt a strange mix of emotions. The betrayal still stung terribly. Knowing that Michael and Patricia had planned to rob me of my independence was almost unbearable. But there was something else, growing alongside the pain. For the first time since Harold's death, I didn't feel powerless. Daniel, I said as we waited for the elevator. Why are you helping me? This isn't really your responsibility. He was quiet for a moment. Betty, do you remember when my wife Linda died 5 years ago? He nodded. Linda Morrison had been a dear friend. And her death from cancer had devastated Daniel. You showed up at my house every single day for 2 weeks after the funeral. You brought food. You helped me organize Linda's things. You sat with me when I couldn't bear the silence. You never asked for anything in return. You just saw that I needed help and you provided it. The elevator arrived, but neither of us moved to get on. Patricia thinks she can prey on elderly people because she believes we're weak, isolated, forgotten. But she's wrong about you, Betty. Have people who care about you, who remember your kindness, who won't let you be exploited. As I rode down in the elevator, I realized that the woman who had walked into the Sterling Club a few hours ago, lonely, desperate for family acceptance, willing to overlook warning signs to avoid confrontation. That woman was gone. In her place was someone I hadn't been in a very long time, a fighter. I spent Sunday morning rehearsing the phone call I would make to Patricia. Daniel had given me a small recording device and coached me on how to sound confused and apologetic without overdoing it. The hardest part was accepting that I would have to pretend to be exactly what Patricia wanted me to be, a vulnerable, declining old woman. At 10:30, I dialed Patricia's number with trembling hands. Betty. Her voice was immediately concerned, but I could hear something underneath it. Satisfaction, maybe even excitement. We've been so worried about you. How are you feeling this morning? I'm embarrassed, Patricia. About last night. I don't know what came over me. There was a pause. And when Patricia spoke again, her tone had shifted to what I now recognized as her manipulative sweetness. Oh, Betty, you don't need to be embarrassed. We understand that. You've been under a lot of stress. Losing Harold, living alone in that big house. It's natural that you might feel overwhelmed sometimes living alone in that big house. She made it sound like a problem that needed solving. Keep thinking about what happened, I said, following Daniel's script. That man, Dr. Holbrook, was he really a friend of yours? I felt like he was studying me, Betty. Dr. Holbrook is a very kind man who specializes in helping people who are going through difficult transitions. Michael and I thought it might be good for you to talk to someone professional about how you've been feeling. The lie came so smoothly, delivered with such apparent concern that if I hadn't known the truth, I might have been grateful. Suppose I have been feeling confused lately, I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Sometimes I can't remember if I've taken my medication or whether I've locked the doors at night. This was completely false. I had never been more organized or careful about my routine, but I could almost hear Patricia's triumph through the phone. "Oh honey, that's exactly what we've been noticing. Michael has been so worried about you." "We both have." "Yes." I injected a note of hope into my voice. "I sometimes feel like he's been avoiding me since Harold died." "Betty, that's not true at all. Michael loves you dearly. He's just been concerned about your well-being and didn't want to burden you with his worries." Another lie. If Michael had been worried about my well-being, he would have visited more, called more, included me in family activities. Instead, he had become a stranger who barely acknowledged my existence. "Patricia, could we maybe have coffee sometime this week? Just you and me. I'd like to apologize properly for how I behaved at dinner." "Course, Betty, I think that's a wonderful idea. How about Wednesday afternoon? I could come to your house. It might be more comfortable for you than going out." She wanted to come to my house. Daniel had predicted this. Patricia would want to see my living situation. Maybe document any signs of decline or neglect she could use against me later. "That sounds lovely. Around 2 o'clock. Perfect. Vidya, want you to know that Michael and I only want what's best for you. We're family and family takes care of each other." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the recording device, feeling sick. The woman on that phone call had sounded genuinely caring, genuinely concerned. If I didn't know what she was really planning, I would have been touched by her attention. I called Daniel to report on the conversation. "She took the bait," he said with satisfaction. "She's coming to assess your living situation on Wednesday. Betty, this is going to be difficult. But I need you to make the house look like you're struggling to maintain it." "What do you mean?" "Leave some dishes in a sink. Maybe put a few bills on the counter. Make it look like you're having trouble keeping up with paperwork. Nothing too dramatic, but enough to support her narrative that you need supervision." The idea of deliberately making my home look neglected was almost physically painful. Harold and I had always kept our house immaculate, and maintaining that standard had been one of the ways I honored his memory. But I understood the strategy. Monday and Tuesday passed slowly. I found myself remembering the early years of Michael and Patricia's marriage, trying to understand when things had changed, when the woman I thought was a loving daughter-in-law had revealed her true nature. Michael had met Patricia when he was 36, working as a financial advisor at a large firm downtown. He'd been unlucky in love, a string of relationships that never quite worked out, and Harold and I had started to worry that he might never find someone to settle down with. When he brought Patricia to meet us, I was immediately struck by how beautiful and poised she was. She worked as a private companion to elderly clients, helping them with daily activities and providing emotional support. It seemed like such a caring profession, and she spoke about her clients with apparent warmth and concern. "I love working with older adults," she had told us over that first dinner. "They have so much wisdom and life experience. Feel like I learn something new every day from the people I care for." Harold had been charmed by her immediately. "She's good for you," he told Michael later. "She's got substance, not like some of those other girls you've dated." The wedding was beautiful, held at the Sterling Club, the same place where I'd almost walked into Patricia's trap. I remember dancing with Michael at the reception, telling him how proud I was of the man he'd become. How happy I was that he'd found someone who would love and care for him. "She's special, Mom," he'd said, spinning me around the dance floor. "I've never felt this way about anyone before." For the first few years of their marriage, Patricia had indeed seemed special. She was attentive to Harold and me, remembering birthdays and anniversaries, bringing thoughtful gifts, joining us for holiday celebrations. When Emma was born, she was generous about sharing the baby with us, letting me babysit and help with childcare. But looking back now, I could see the subtle changes that had begun. Even then, Patricia always had reasons why visits needed to be shortened, why family gatherings needed to be scheduled around her preferences. She gradually took over the planning of holiday meals, moving them from our house to theirs, then eventually to restaurants where the conversation was more controlled and intimate. Family traditions were lost. After Joshua was born, the changes became more pronounced. Patricia began suggesting that Harold and I were getting older and might find it tiring to keep up with young children. Our babysitting duties were reduced, then eliminated altogether. Family dinners became monthly instead of weekly, then even less frequent. When Harold was diagnosed with lung cancer 3 years ago, I expected Patricia to be supportive to help us navigate the difficult months ahead. Instead, she seemed to withdraw from us even more. She rarely visited Harold during his treatments, always having conflicts with her work schedule or commitments with the children. I remember one particular incident about 6 months before Harold died. He had been having a difficult week, weakened by chemotherapy and struggling with pain. I called Michael to ask if he could visit. Harold always perked up when he saw his son. "I'll check with Patricia about our schedule," Michael had said. "Check with Patricia. Michael, your father is dying. Why do you need to check with anyone?" There had been a long pause. "Mom, you know how busy we are with the kids' activities. Patricia manages our calendar, and I don't want to mess up her planning." When had my son become someone who needed his wife's permission to visit his dying father? When had Patricia become the gatekeeper of our family relationships? Harold died on a Tuesday morning in February. I was holding his hand alone because Patricia had convinced Michael that it was too traumatic for the children to be around. So much sadness, and Michael shouldn't leave Patricia to handle bedtime routines by herself. The funeral was the last time I felt truly connected to Michael and Patricia. In our shared grief, it seemed like we might find our way back to being a family. Patricia helped with arrangements. Michael delivered a beautiful eulogy, and for a few days I felt supported and loved. But within weeks of the funeral, the isolation began. Phone calls became shorter and less frequent. Invitations to family events dried up. When I asked to spend time with Emma and Joshua, there were always complications. They had playdates, sports practices, homework that couldn't be interrupted. By summer, I was seeing my grandchildren maybe once a month, and those visits were always brief and supervised. Patricia would stay in the room, directing conversations and cutting visits short when she decided the children were getting tired or overstimulated. I started to feel like I was disappearing from my own family's life. At Emma's 9th birthday party in March, I was seated at a separate table from the immediate family. When Joshua lost his first tooth in April, I learned about it from a Facebook post rather than a phone call. By the time Patricia called about the dinner at the Sterling Club, I was so lonely and desperate for connection that I ignored every warning sign. Sitting in my kitchen on Tuesday evening, I realized that Harold's death hadn't just taken away my husband. Had been the beginning of Patricia's plan to eliminate me entirely. With Harold gone, I was no longer protected by his presence, no longer essential to Michael's happiness. I had become an asset to be managed and eventually harvested. Wednesday afternoon arrived gray and chilly. I had spent the morning reluctantly preparing for Patricia's visit, leaving a few dishes in the sink, scattering some unopened mail on the kitchen counter, deliberately not making my bed. It went against every instinct I had, but Daniel's coaching had been clear. I needed to appear to be struggling with basic self-care. At exactly 2 o'clock, I heard Patricia's car in the driveway. Through the window, I watched her approach the house, noting how her eyes were already scanning the exterior, the yard, looking for signs of neglect she could document. I opened the door before she could knock, making sure to seem slightly flustered and disorganized. "Patricia, hello. I'm so glad you could come. I was just tidying up, but I'm afraid the house is a bit of a mess." "Oh, Betty, don't worry about that," she said. But I could see her taking inventory of my appearance. I had deliberately worn an older dress, left my hair slightly unkempt, skipped my usual light makeup. "How are you feeling?" "I'm all right, I suppose. Some days are harder than others. Would you like some coffee? I think I have some made, although I can't remember when I started it." I led her to the kitchen where she immediately noticed the dishes in the sink, the scattered mail, the general air of someone not quite keeping up with household tasks. "Betty, have you been eating properly, taking care of yourself?" I said, injecting a note of uncertainty into my voice. "Sometimes I forget meal times, or I'll start making something and then get distracted. Yesterday I think I left the stove on for hours after I finished cooking." This was completely false. I had never left the stove on in my life, but Patricia's eyes lit up with interest. "That's concerning, Betty. That could be dangerous." I poured coffee with deliberately shaky hands, making sure to spill a little on the counter. "I know sometimes I worry about what might happen living alone in this big house with no one to check on me." "Well, you're not completely alone. Michael and I are here for you." But as we sat at my kitchen table, Patricia's questions became increasingly intrusive. Wanted to know about my daily routines, my medical care, my financial management. She asked about my medications, whether I was keeping up with bill payments, if I had been driving safely. Each question was phrased with apparent concern, but I could sense the calculating mind behind her caring facade. She was building a case, documenting evidence of my supposed decline. The most disturbing moment came when she started talking about my future. "Betty, I've been thinking about your living situation. This house is really too big for one person. Have you ever considered something smaller, more manageable?" "I've thought about it," I lied. "But this house has so many memories of Harold. I don't know if I could bear to leave." "I understand the emotional attachment, but practically speaking, there are some wonderful senior communities now. Places where you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance, where there would be people around to help if you needed anything." Senior communities. She was already planning to warehouse me somewhere while she and Michael took control of my assets. "Some of them even have memory care units," she continued, "for people who are starting to have cognitive difficulties." The casual way she dropped that phrase, memory care units, sent chills down my spine. She was planting seeds, preparing me for the idea that I might need institutional care. Patricia prepared to leave. She hugged me with what appeared to be genuine affection. "Betty, I want you to know that Michael and I are so grateful to have you in our lives. We'll always take care of you no matter what." After she left, I sat in my kitchen feeling dirty, contaminated by her false kindness. Had just participated in my own destruction. Helped her build the case that would be used to steal my freedom. But I also felt something else, a growing determination to make sure Patricia's plan backfired spectacularly. That evening I called Daniel to report on the visit. "She's moving faster than I expected," he said after I described our conversation. The questions about senior communities, the comments about memory care. "She's already positioning you for institutional placement." "Daniel, I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending to be confused and helpless. It makes me feel like I'm betraying Harold's memory, betraying everything we built together." "Betty, you're not betraying anything. You're fighting back in the only way possible against someone who would destroy your life for money. Harold would be proud of your courage." "What happens next?" "Next, we start gathering our own evidence. I want you to document every interaction you have with Patricia and Michael. Record phone calls when possible. Keep notes about conversations. And Betty, I think it's time to make some changes to your legal documents." "What kind of changes?" Daniel's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "The kind that will ensure Patricia never gets her hands on your money, no matter what happens with the guardianship proceedings." As I prepared for bed that night, I looked around the house Harold and I had shared for 23 years. Patricia wanted to take this away from me, to reduce me to a helpless old woman warehoused in some institutional facility while she lived in luxury on the proceeds from my life. But she had made one crucial miscalculation. She had underestimated the woman she was trying to destroy. And that mistake was going to cost her everything. The call from Michael came on Friday morning, exactly as Daniel had predicted it would. Patricia had clearly reported back about my declining condition, and now they were ready to move to the next phase of their plan. "Mom, I think we need to have a serious conversation about your living situation." His voice was different. Clinical, detached, like he was discussing a business transaction rather than his mother's life. I gripped the phone tighter, the recording device Daniel had given me already running. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Patricia told me about her visit Wednesday. She's concerned about some of the things she observed. The mess in the kitchen, you forgetting about the stove, the confusion about your routines." Each word felt like a knife. My own son was building a case against me based on lies I had been forced to tell. "I've been having some difficult days," I said, sticking to the script Daniel and I had prepared. "Sometimes I feel overwhelmed managing everything by myself." Exactly why we need to talk. "I'm coming over this afternoon around 4 o'clock. Patricia will be with me." Of course, Patricia would be with him. She wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to watch me perform my role as the declining, helpless mother. After Michael hung up, I called Daniel immediately. "They're coming this afternoon to have a serious conversation about my living situation. Think this is it. The final push to get me to agree to guardianship." "Perfect. Betty, I want you to let them make their proposal. Don't resist too much. We want them to feel confident that you're malleable and easily manipulated, but also don't agree to anything immediately. Tell them you need time to think. What if they pressure me to sign something? Under no circumstances should you sign anything. If they push too hard, that actually works in our favor. It shows their true intentions aren't about your well-being." That afternoon I spent an hour preparing the house to look like someone who was struggling. More dishes in the sink, newspapers scattered on tables, a load of laundry left half folded on the couch. It made me sick to deliberately create this impression, but I knew it was necessary. At precisely 4 o'clock, I heard 2 car doors slam in my driveway. Through the window, I could see Michael and Patricia walking toward my front door, both carrying folders and looking grimly determined. I opened the door before they could knock, trying to appear slightly confused about the timing. "Michael, Patricia. Oh, you're here already." Thought you said 5 o'clock. We said 4, Mom. Michael's tone was patient but condescending, the way you might speak to a child. May we come in? I led them to the living room, noting how Patricia's eyes immediately swept the space, cataloging the deliberate disarray I had created. She exchanged a meaningful look with Michael. Betty, we're here because we love you and we're worried, Patricia began, her voice dripping with false concern. The other day when I visited, I noticed some things that suggest you might be having difficulty managing on your own. What kinds of things? I asked, though I already knew. Michael leaned forward, his expression serious. Mom, Patricia told me about the dishes piling up, the scattered mail, the incident with leaving the stove on. These aren't normal aging issues. They're signs of cognitive decline that could be dangerous. Cognitive decline. The phrase hit me like a slap. My own son was diagnosing me with dementia based on Patricia's fabricated observations. I have good days and bad days, I said quietly. Since your father died, sometimes I feel disoriented. We understand that, Patricia said, reaching over to pat my hand in a gesture that made my skin crawl. That's why we think it might be time to consider some additional support. Michael opened his folder and pulled out a glossy brochure. Mom, we've been researching some options for you. There's a wonderful senior community called Meadowbrook Manor about 20 minutes from here. They have different levels of care from independent living all the way up to full-time assistance. I took the brochure with trembling hands, not from fear but from rage. Meadowbrook Manor looked pleasant enough in the photos, but I could see the subtext clearly. They wanted to warehouse me there while they took control of my life. It looks very nice, I said, because that's what they expected to hear. But I'm not sure I'm ready to leave this house. Harold and I have so many memories here. Patricia and Michael exchanged another look, and I could see frustration flicker across Patricia's face. Betty, we understand the emotional attachment, Patricia said, but we have to be practical. This house is becoming too much for you to maintain. And if something happened, if you fell or had a medical emergency or forgot to turn off the stove, there would be no one here to help. What about you? Couldn't you check on me more often? The question hung in the air for a moment before Michael answered. Mom, Patricia and I have full lives. We have the kids, our work, our own responsibilities. We can't be running over here every day to make sure you're okay. There it was. The brutal honesty beneath all their concern. I was a burden, an inconvenience that needed to be managed efficiently. Besides, Patricia added, at Meadowbrook, you'd have people around all the time. You wouldn't be lonely anymore. He said it as if my loneliness was a character flaw rather than something they had deliberately created by systematically excluding me from family life. The other advantage, Michael continued, is that we could help you manage your finances more effectively. Patricia has experience with elderly care. She knows how to make sure your money is used wisely for your needs. Patricia has experience with elderly care. I almost laughed at the understatement. According to Daniel's research, Patricia had experience manipulating elderly people and stealing their assets. I don't know, I said, trying to sound uncertain rather than furious. This is such a big decision. I need time to think about it. Michael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I don't think you understand how serious this situation is. Patricia and I are trying to help you before something terrible happens. What kind of terrible thing? Patricia leaned forward, her expression grave. Betty, what if you had a stroke or a heart attack alone in this house? What if you fell and couldn't get to a phone? What if you forgot to pay your bills, or got confused about your medications. Each hypothetical disaster was designed to make me feel helpless and afraid, but instead of fear, I felt a cold anger building in my chest. I suppose those things could happen, I said carefully. That's why we think it would be best if we took over some of the responsibility for your care, Michael said. We could handle your finances, make sure your bills are paid, coordinate your medical care. It would take so much pressure off. Handle your finances, coordinate your medical care. They were describing total control over my life, presented as a kindness. How would that work exactly? Yes. Patricia pulled out another folder. We've already spoken to an attorney about setting up a guardianship arrangement. It's a legal process that would allow us to make decisions on your behalf when you're not able to make them yourself. But I am able to make my own decisions. Are you? Michael's voice was sharp now, his patience wearing thin. Mom, you left a family dinner in the middle of the meal because your lawyer called. You forgot what time we were coming today. You're living in a house that's falling apart around you because you can't keep up with basic maintenance. Each accusation stung because they were based on situations Patricia had orchestrated or I had performed for their benefit. But Michael didn't know that. He genuinely believed I was falling apart. I know I've been struggling, I said quietly. But I'm not ready to give up my independence. Patricia's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw a flash of irritation cross her face. Betty, independence is a luxury you may not be able to afford much longer. We're trying to help you transition to a safer, more appropriate living situation while you still have some choice in the matter. The threat was subtle but clear. Agree to their plan now or have it imposed on you later. What if I said no? Yes. If I wanted to stay in this house and manage my own affairs? Michael and Patricia exchanged a long look and I could see them communicating silently. Finally Michael spoke. Mom, if you're not capable of making sound decisions about your welfare, then the decision might not be entirely up to you. It was the ultimate threat. If I didn't comply voluntarily, they would have me declared incompetent and force compliance. Are you threatening me, Michael? I'm trying to help you, Mom. We both are. But if you're going to be stubborn about accepting help, then we might have to explore other options. Patricia placed her hand on Michael's arm, a warning gesture. They had revealed too much, pushed too hard, but the damage was done. I had heard my own son threaten to have me forcibly committed if I didn't surrender my independence willingly. I think we should give your mother some time to process what we've discussed, Patricia said smoothly. Is a lot to take in all at once. Yes, I agreed, standing on unsteady legs. Need to think about everything you've said. Michael stood as well, his expression softening slightly. Mama, hope you understand that we're doing this because we love you. Dad would want us to take care of you. The mention of Harold was like a physical blow. How dare he invoke his father's memory to justify this betrayal? Your father would want me to be happy, I said quietly. He would want me to be treated with respect and dignity. Course, Patricia said quickly. Exactly what we want too. As they prepared to leave, Patricia gave me another of her suffocating hugs. Betty, I want you to know that whatever happens, Michael and I will make sure you're taken care of. Your family and family looks out for each other. After they left, I sat in my living room, staring at the brochure for Meadowbrook Manor. The photos showed smiling elderly people engaged in activities, eating meals in a communal dining room, sitting in comfortable chairs, reading or watching television. It looked pleasant enough, but I knew it would be a prison, a place where I would be warehoused while Patricia and Michael sold my house and spent my money. But the most devastating part wasn't the threat to my freedom or my finances. It was the realization that I had completely lost my son. The Michael who had just left my house was not the boy I had raised, not the young man who had danced with me at his wedding and promised to always love and respect me. That Michael had been replaced by someone who saw me as a problem to be solved, an asset to be managed, an inconvenience to be efficiently disposed of. Patricia hadn't just married my son. She had systematically destroyed him, turning him into an accomplice in her scheme. Picked up my phone and called Daniel. "How did it go?" he asked immediately. "They threatened me, Daniel. Michael actually threatened to have me declared incompetent if I don't agree to their guardianship plan." "Perfect. Did you get it recorded?" "Every word, Betty." "They just did is called coercion, and it's illegal in guardianship proceedings. They've essentially admitted that their concern for your welfare is fake. They're willing to force you into compliance regardless of your wishes." "Daniel, I need to ask you something and I want an honest answer." "Course. There any chance that Michael genuinely believes he's helping me? That Patricia has convinced him I really am losing my mind?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Betty, I've been thinking about that same question based on what you've told me about his behavior over the past year. I think Patricia has been feeding him a carefully constructed narrative about your decline. He may genuinely believe that you need help, but does that excuse what he just did? Does it excuse threatening his own mother? No, it doesn't. Whether he believes Patricia's lies or not, threatening to have you forcibly committed because you won't agree to surrender your independence is cruel and probably illegal." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the betrayal settle over me like a heavy blanket. Even if Michael thought he was acting in my best interests, he had chosen Patricia's version of reality over his own observations, his wife's manipulation, over his mother's protests. "What do we do now?" "Now we spring our trap. Lydia, want you to call Patricia tomorrow and tell her you've decided to accept their help. Tell her you want to visit Meadowbrook Manor and that you're ready to discuss the guardianship arrangements. Won't that give them what they want?" "Not quite. Because while they think they're winning, we'll be documenting everything they do. And when the time comes for them to face the consequences of their actions, we'll have all the evidence we need." That night, I lay in the bed I had shared with Harold for 23 years, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the conversation with Michael and Patricia. Tomorrow I would call them and pretend to surrender. I would play the role of the defeated, compliant old woman they wanted me to be. But deep inside I was no longer that woman. I was someone harder, stronger, more determined than I had ever been before. Patricia thought she had broken me, that she had successfully turned my own son against me and isolated me from any source of support. She thought I was alone and helpless, ready to be harvested like a crop she had been carefully tending. Had no idea that her worst nightmare was about to begin, and it would start with a single phone call where I would give her exactly what she thought she wanted. The trap was set. All that remained was to watch her walk into it. Saturday morning arrived with a crispness that matched my newfound resolve. I sat at my kitchen table, the phone in front of me like a weapon I was preparing to use. Daniel had coached me carefully on this. It needed to sound like genuine surrender, complete capitulation to Patricia and Michael's plans. At 9 o'clock I dialed Patricia's number. "Betty," her voice was immediately warm, almost triumphant. She had been expecting this. How are you feeling this morning? I didn't sleep very well, I said, injecting a note of defeat into my voice. I kept thinking about everything you and Michael said yesterday. Oh honey, I'm sure it was overwhelming. These kinds of decisions are never easy. Patricia, I think maybe you're. But maybe I do need help. There was a pause and I could almost hear Patricia's satisfaction through the phone. Betty, that takes so much courage to admit. Proud of you for being honest about your situation. Proud of me. As if acknowledging my supposed weakness was some kind of virtue. I was wondering if we could visit that place you showed me. Meadowbrook Manor. I'd like to see it in person before I make any final decisions. Of course, that's such a wise approach. I actually took the liberty of calling them yesterday, and they have availability for a tour this afternoon. If you're feeling up to it. She had already called them before I had even agreed to anything. Patricia had been moving forward with her plans. This afternoon might be too soon, I said, trying to sound anxious and overwhelmed. Could we maybe do it on Monday? I think I need a day to prepare myself mentally. Monday would be perfect. I'll call them back and set something up. Betty, I want you to know how relieved Michael and I are that you're open to getting the help you need. About the other thing you mentioned, the guardianship arrangement. How would that work exactly? Patricia's voice became businesslike, efficient. It's actually quite straightforward. We would meet with an attorney who would help us fill out the paperwork. Then there would be a brief hearing where a judge would review your situation and approve the arrangement. It's really just a formality. Formality. She made it sound like renewing a driver's license rather than signing away my fundamental rights as an adult. Would I need my own lawyer for something like that? Oh, Betty, that's not necessary. Michael and I would be looking out for your interests. Having your own attorney would just complicate things and make the process more expensive. Of course, she didn't want me to have independent legal representation. That might interfere with her plans. I suppose that makes sense, I said. You and Michael know what's best for me. We do, honey. We really do. After I hung up, I immediately called Daniel to report on the conversation. She's moving even faster than we expected, he said. Calling Meadowbrook before you agreed to visit. Discouraging you from getting your own attorney. She's showing her. Now, Daniel, what if she's recording our conversations too? What if she's building her own case that I'm incompetent? Let her try. Betty, remember that you're not actually incompetent. Any objective evaluation would show that you're mentally sharp and capable of managing your own affairs. Her case depends entirely on manufactured evidence and lies. Speaking of which, what did you mean the other day about making changes to my legal documents? Daniel's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Betty, this morning I'm going to help you execute what's called an irrevocable trust. You're going to transfer all your assets, your house, your savings, your investments into a legal entity that Patricia and Michael can never touch, no matter what happens with guardianship proceedings. My heart skipped a beat. Is that legal? Completely legal as long as you're mentally competent when you sign the documents. And Betty, we're going to have that competency independently verified by a psychiatrist who has no connection to Patricia or her schemes. But what happens to me? How do I live if all my money is in a trust? The trust will pay you a monthly income for the rest of your life. You'll have everything you need, but the principal will be protected. And here's the beautiful part. When Patricia and Michael try to claim your assets as your guardians, they'll discover that there are no assets to claim. I felt a surge of fierce satisfaction. They'll find out that I've outsmarted them. Not just outsmarted them, Betty. You'll have set a trap that will expose their true intentions to the legal system. When they realize there's no money to steal, their mask of concern will slip completely. Monday morning I met Daniel at the office of Dr. Sarah Chen, the geriatric psychiatrist who had originally alerted him to Patricia's scheme. Dr. Chen was a kind-faced woman in her 50s who put me at ease. Immediately, "Mrs. Betty, I want to apologize for the position you've been put in. When Patricia contacted me about a competency evaluation, something about her approach raised red flags." "What kind of red flags?" "Most family members who are genuinely concerned about a loved one's mental capacity are reluctant to pursue formal proceedings. They hope to find other solutions, ways to provide support without taking away independence." Patricia seemed eager for a quick evaluation and immediate guardianship. That's usually a sign of financial motivation rather than genuine care. Dr. Chan conducted a thorough examination, memory tests, problem-solving exercises, questions about my daily functioning. The entire process took 2 hours, and at the end, she smiled. "Mrs. Betty, you are clearly mentally competent and capable of managing your own affairs. I'll be happy to provide written documentation of that fact." After the psychiatric evaluation, Daniel and I went to his office to execute the trust documents. As I signed my name to the papers that would protect my life savings from Patricia's scheme, I felt a profound sense of relief. "What?" "Yes. Now we wait for Patricia to make her next move. And Betty, I want you to know that whatever happens, you're going to be fine. You'll have a secure income, a safe place to live, and people who care about your well-being." That afternoon, Patricia picked me up for our visit to Meadowbrook Manor. Was dressed professionally like a businesswoman closing an important deal, which I suppose was exactly what she thought she was doing. "How are you feeling about today?" she asked as we drove. "Nervous," I said honestly. "It is such a big change. Change is always difficult, but sometimes it's necessary for our own good." Brook Manor was exactly what I had expected from the brochure. A well-maintained facility, with pleasant common areas and cheerful staff members. The director, Mrs. Collins, gave us a comprehensive tour, showing us different types of accommodations from independent living apartments to full care rooms. "What level of care do you think would be appropriate?" Mrs. Collins asked Patricia as if I weren't standing right. "We're thinking assisted living to start with," Patricia replied. "Betty has been having some difficulty with daily tasks, and we want to make sure she has support available when she needs it." Some difficulty with daily tasks. Patricia was already rewriting my history, creating a narrative of decline that would justify her decisions. As we toured the memory care unit, I noticed Patricia paying particular attention to the security measures. Locked doors, staff supervision, limited access to the outside. She was evaluating this as a potential prison, not a home. "The memory care residents seem very content," Patricia observed to Mrs. Collins. "Yes, many families find it reassuring to know their loved ones are in a secure environment where they can't wander off or get confused. Can't wander off, can't get confused, can't leave." On the drive home, Patricia was awesome in her praise of the facility. "Didn't that seem wonderful, Betty? All those activities, the friendly staff, the beautiful dining room. I think you'd be very happy there. Did seem nice." I agreed. "When would something like this happen?" "Well, we'd want to get the guardianship paperwork finalized first. That way we can handle all the arrangements for you. Make sure everything goes smoothly." "How long does that process usually take?" "The attorney said we could probably have everything Completed within 2 weeks if we move quickly. 2 weeks. Patricia was planning to have complete control over my life. Within 2 weeks. That evening, Michael called to check on how the visit had gone. Patricia said you seem to really like Meadowbrook. I'm so glad you're being open to this change. Still scary, Michael, but I know you and Patricia have my best interests at heart. We do, Mom. We really do. And I want you to know that once we get the guardianship arranged, you won't have to worry about anything anymore. We'll handle all the difficult decisions, all the paperwork, all the financial management. You can just focus on enjoying your golden years. My golden years in a locked memory care facility while they spent my life savings. Does sound like a relief. I said, I love you, Mom. Dad would be so proud of how brave you're being about all this. After Michael hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling the full weight of what was about to happen. In 2 weeks, if everything went according to Patricia's plan, I would be committed to Meadowbrook Manor. My house would be sold, my savings would be under Patricia and Michael's control, and I would be reduced to a helpless old woman dependent on their generosity for my survival. But Patricia had made one crucial mistake in her scheming. She had assumed that I was isolated, that I had no one to turn to for help, that Daniel was just a neighbor doing favors rather than a skilled attorney with decades of experience. Wednesday morning I called Patricia with what I hope sounded like good news. Patricia, I've been thinking about everything and I've made a decision. Want to move forward with the guardianship arrangement as quickly as possible. Oh, Betty, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you for taking this step. I was wondering, could we meet with the attorney this week? I'd like to get the paperwork started. Absolutely. Let me call Michael and see when he's available. We could probably meet as early as Friday. Actually, Patricia, I have a confession to make. I've been feeling so overwhelmed by all of this that I asked my neighbor Daniel to help me understand the legal aspects. He's an attorney and I thought it would be good to have someone explain things to me in simple terms. There was a long pause. Betty, I don't think that's necessary. The attorney Michael and I have chosen is very experienced with these kinds of arrangements. Oh, I'm sure he is. Daniel just offered to come along for moral support. Hope that's okay. Another pause. Longer this time. Could almost hear Patricia calculating, trying to figure out if Daniel's presence posed a threat to her plans. Course, Betty, if it would make you feel more comfortable, Daniel is welcome to join us. But I could hear the tension in her voice. For the first time since this scheme had begun, Patricia was dealing with an unknown variable, a legal professional who might ask inconvenient questions. That afternoon, I met with Daniel to prepare for Friday's meeting. Betty, this is it. This is where Patricia and Michael will reveal their true intentions. I want you to be prepared for what you're going to hear. What do you mean? They're going to present you with documents that essentially sign your life away. They'll try to rush you into signing without giving you time to read everything carefully. And when I start asking questions about the terms and conditions, you're going to see them. Panic. What kinds of questions? Daniel smiled grimly. Questions about how your money will be managed. What restrictions will be placed on your activities? What happens if you want to revoke the guardianship arrangement? Questions that expose the fact that this isn't about your welfare at all. And when they realize that I don't actually have any assets to steal, that's when the mask comes off completely. That's when Patricia shows you who she really is. Friday evening, I sat in my favorite chair in the living room looking around at the house Harold and I had built together. Tomorrow, Patricia thought she would trick me into signing away everything we had worked for. She thought she would walk away from our meeting with complete control over my life and my assets. Instead, she was about to walk into a trap that would destroy her completely. The woman who had systematically isolated me from my family, who had turned my own son against me, who had planned to warehouse me in an institution while stealing everything I owned. That woman was about to discover that the helpless old lady she thought she was manipulating had been playing a game of her own, and I was very good at games, much better than Patricia had ever imagined. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock on Friday morning at the offices of Hartwell and Associates, the law firm Patricia and Michael had chosen. I dressed carefully that morning. Not too neat, not too disheveled. Just right for a confused old woman who needed guidance. Managing her life. Daniel picked me up at 9:30, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze as we drove downtown. Remember, Betty, let them do most of the talking. Act confused when appropriate, but don't overdo it. And whatever you do, don't sign anything until I've reviewed it completely. I'm ready, I said, and I meant it. Hartwell and Associates occupied a gleaming office building downtown. Patricia and Michael were already waiting in the conference room. When we arrived along with a sharp-faced attorney named Mr. Hartwell, who barely looked up when we entered. Mrs. Betty. So good to see you, Patricia said, standing to embrace me. I hope you slept well last night. Not very well, I admitted. I kept thinking about everything that's going to change. Michael stood and shook Daniel's hand with barely concealed irritation. I'm not sure why Mother felt she needed additional legal representation for what should be a straightforward process. Daniel smiled pleasantly. I'm just here to help Betty understand the documents she'll be signing. As her neighbor and friend, I want to make sure she's comfortable with everything. Mr. Hartwell cleared his throat impatiently. Well, let's get started then. Mrs. Betty, your son and daughter-in-law have petitioned the court to appoint them as your legal guardians. This would allow them to make financial and medical decisions on your behalf. He slid a thick stack of papers across the table to me. These documents establish the guardianship arrangement and transfer management of your assets to Michael and Patricia. Daniel leaned forward. May I review these before Mrs. Betty signs anything? That's not really necessary, Mr. Hartwell said. This is a standard guardianship agreement. I'm sure it is, but I'd like to understand the specific terms. As Daniel began reading through the documents, I watched Patricia's face. She was trying to look patient and concerned, but I could see tension in her jawline, frustration in her eyes. I have a few questions, Daniel said after several minutes. This clause here gives Michael and Patricia complete discretion over how Betty's assets are invested and spent. There's no requirement for accounting or oversight. That's correct, Mr. Hartwell replied. The guardians have full financial authority, and this section authorizes them to sell Betty's house and place her in whatever residential facility they deem appropriate, regardless of her preferences. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. Daniel, we only want what's best for Betty. The house is too much for her to maintain, and Meadowbrook Manor would provide the care she needs. I see. And what happens if Betty recovers her capacity and wants to revoke the guardianship? Mr. Hartwell looked annoyed. These arrangements are generally permanent. Reversing a guardianship requires extensive court proceedings. Daniel nodded thoughtfully, then pulled out his own folder. Before we proceed, I think there's something everyone should know. Betty, would you like to tell them what we've arranged? This was the moment I had been waiting for. I looked directly at Patricia and Michael, seeing the expectation in their faces, the confidence that they were about to gain control of my life and my assets. I have transferred all my assets into an irrevocable trust, I said. Only my house, my savings, my investments, everything is now legally owned by the Morrison Family Trust. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia's face went completely white. Michael looked confused, then alarmed. What does that mean? Michael asked. Daniel smiled. It means that, as of Monday morning, Betty no longer owns any assets that can be placed under guardianship. The trust will provide her with a monthly income for life, but the principal is completely protected. Patricia found her voice first. That's impossible, Betty. You can't have done that without telling us. Why would I need to tell you? Yes. They were my assets to do with as I chose. Mr. Hartwell was frantically flipping through his papers. If there are no assets to manage, then the basis for this guardianship petition has been undermined. Actually, Daniel continued, there's something else everyone should know. Dr. Sarah Chen, the geriatric psychiatrist, conducted a comprehensive evaluation of Betty this week. Her report confirms that Betty is completely mentally competent and has no need for guardianship of any kind. Patricia's mask finally slipped completely. This is ridiculous. Betty, you've been confused. Forgetting things, having trouble managing your household. Have I interrupted. Or have I been pretending to have those problems because I knew you were planning to have me declared incompetent? The room erupted in chaos. Michael was demanding to know what I meant. Mr. Hartwell was asking about the validity of the competency evaluation. Patricia was insisting that I was confused and being manipulated. But Daniel's voice cut through the noise. I should mention that we've been recording conversations related to this guardianship attempt, including the one where Michael threatened to have Betty forcibly committed if she didn't voluntarily surrender her independence. Patricia's face crumpled for the first time since I'd known her. She looked genuinely defeated. You've been planning this, Michael said, staring at me in disbelief. You've been manipulating us. No, Michael, I've been protecting myself from people who wanted to steal my life. We were trying to help you. You were trying to help yourselves to my money. Daniel stood, gathering his papers. Mr. Hartwell, I think this meeting is over. There's no guardianship petition to pursue. And attempting to proceed with coercive tactics could expose your clients to criminal liability. As we prepared to leave, Patricia made one last desperate attempt. Betty, please. Think about Emma and Joshua. Think about your family. I stopped and turned back to her. I have thought about them. Patricia. I've thought about what kind of grandmother I want to be. Not a victim, not someone who can be manipulated and discarded. I want to be someone they can respect. 6 months later, I was standing in the garden of my new home, a charming cottage just 2 blocks from Daniel and his wife Margaret. It was smaller than the house Harold and I had shared, but it was mine, purchased with income from the trust that protected my life savings from people who would exploit them. The doorbell rang and I opened it to find Emma and Joshua on my doorstep, accompanied by Daniel's daughter, Susan. Grandma Betty. Emma threw her arms around me. Can we see your new garden? Over the past months, Michael and Patricia had gotten divorced. The stress of their failed scheme, combined with Patricia's mounting legal problems, had destroyed their marriage. Michael had eventually reached out to me, awkward and ashamed, attempting to rebuild our relationship. I had forgiven him, but I had also learned to set boundaries. He was welcome in my life, but only on terms that respected my independence and dignity. Patricia had disappeared, leaving town after the divorce was finalized. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had moved to another state, possibly to find new elderly targets for her schemes. I watched Emma and Joshua explore my garden, laughing and running among the flowers I had planted. I felt a profound sense of peace. I had not just survived Patricia's attempt to destroy my life, had discovered strength and resources I didn't know I possessed. The woman who had been manipulated and isolated, who had felt invisible and forgotten, was gone. In her place was someone who would never again allow herself to be victimized by people who confused kindness with weakness. The story continues in the next chapter in the next linked video. But first, I need you to subscribe to join the family, as we are looking forward to hit our first 10,000 subscribers target, and feel free to share your story in the comments. You matter, your voice does too.